Tell you something, being a man ain't no joke.
Toxic masculinity.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sex.
Hello, fellas. Welcome back to A Christian Male Perspective. My name is Andre, and here on this channel, we discuss how Christian men and men in general should be able to move and operate in this modern world. Today, we're going to get back into our classic series. For those of you not familiar, the classic series is a list of traits that we as men can work and develop in ourselves so that we can better move and operate in this world. Classic stands for being confident, being a leader, being assertive, self-control, which is our focus for today, being sober-minded, being intelligent, and being competitive. Now, please do the YouTube thing, like the video, leave a comment. You guys know how it helps the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel. We put out a new video about once a week, typically on Sunday nights or Monday nights. To get the new content and to be able to push it out to men, being able to continue to better their lives. All right, guys, let's get into it. So, fellas, on this channel, we focus on how men can improve their lives, and that's self-improvement. So many of the topics that we're going to talk about is how we can go about improving ourselves despite what the world or anyone else is doing. With that being said, it is really targeted at men looking in the mirror and saying, okay, how do I get the most out of this time that God has given me to me? One of the ways that I kind of try to distill that down to people in my life is with my son. One of the first rules that I gave him was this: you cannot control anyone else, but you can control yourself, and you are responsible for everything that you say and do. Now, I talked about that in my personal responsibility video from last week, but that's also relevant when it comes to self-control. Guys, too many times we want to blame other people for the way we react or the decisions that we make. And we're going to get into that a little bit more here shortly through the rest of this video. There's a famous incident, you guys may worry about it, with the Oscars. We'll talk about that at the end. I don't want to belay that too much, but to me, that is a prime example of lack of self-control. But without any further ado, let's get into it. All right, fellas. So as we do in the classic series, we start off with definitions, and we have good old Merriam-Webster to start us off with. And the definition of self-control is this: restraint exercised over one's own impulses, emotions, or desires. So a couple of key words I want to kind of highlight there. One is restraint. That's to be able to control or to have under submission. Secondly is we start talking about impulses, emotions, and desires. And it's interesting how Merriam-Webster separate those things out. Impulses being kind of like your immediate reactions, if you will, to something, kind of what naturally just wants to immediately come out. Emotions and desires is interesting and separated because emotions is more about your feelings and desires is kind of about your wants. It's interesting how Merriam-Webster separate all those things out. Now, if you look at it from a biblical perspective, Jesus is a good example of being tempted in his impulses and emotions and desires through his temptation through Satan. So if those are not familiar, in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, Satan came and tempted Jesus after he was out in the wilderness for 40 days. So guys, if you imagine if you're out and you haven't eaten, for those who have fasted for 40 days and you haven't eaten, I know for me, man, going on a 3-day fast is hard. Even a 1-day fast for me is hard. But I can imagine a 40-day fast. So I can imagine Jesus was hungry. You know, he was tired. It was definitely a physically draining time in his life. So Satan came and tempted him. And the first temptation that he tempted Jesus with was lust of the flesh. Hey, man, here's some bread. Come eat, Turn these stones into bread, if you will. And Jesus says, no, man, I can't do that. We don't live off bread alone. Jesus exercised self-control. And by doing that, he resisted the lust of the flesh. Now, second, Satan took him up on the temple and said, throw yourself down. God said he's going to have his angels command so that you won't even hurt yourself. And Jesus was like, no, 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 no. We're not going to put God to the test. We're not going to do that. And that was Jesus having self-control with this pride of life, with his ego, if you will. He didn't have to show Satan who he was because he knew who he was. Last but not least, Satan took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth and said, I will give you all of this. All of this could be yours. You just bow down and worship me. And Jesus was like, no, worship God and God alone. And in that case, Jesus was showing self-control over the lust of the eyes, the desire to covet and want what other people have. Now, those who familiar with the Bible, you may have been familiar with that story and understand some of those concepts. But I want to take it from a different perspective. I want to look at someone else who, in many ways, is the exact opposite in how Jesus handled those temptations, and that was King David. We're going to talk mostly about his interactions with Bathsheba and how he handled those temptations and his lack of self-control. And this is found primarily in 2 Samuel and chapter 11. There's a little bit in chapter 12 with Nathan as well, but most of the story is found in chapter 11. So let's jump right into it. So when we think about lust of the flesh, that really is having a lack of self-control over your physical body. Now, guys, I can tell you about, for me, one of the areas that I really struggle with this on when it comes to food and overeating. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm thinking another video, my journey that I'm having now on getting back to a desirable weight for myself, a desirable body health for myself. But we as guys, we are in many ways built to indulge. It is part, I think that's part of the masculine nature. We're built to indulge in life. We're built to do that. But a couple of areas that come to mind on where that could really be a struggle is one for food, again, gluttony and overeating, and that's something that I personally work on daily, to be frankly honest. But another area is sex. And this is kind of the obvious thing when you think about lust of the flesh. Obvious as it is still something many of us guys have to work on. We have to improve on. We have to get better at. Now, from a biblical perspective, we know that God says that we should not fornicate. That means that we should not have sex outside of marriage. And there's a whole host of reasons why this is important. One, not only is there a risk for disease, guys, let's be frank, let's be honest. There's 4-letter words out there that are very bad for your health, right? So in having sex, unprotected sex, can definitely put you in a situation where that could end up happening to you. And this is your life. You only got one shot at it, right? So you really want to make the most of this time God has given you. But even outside of having a sexual disease, there's the risk of birthing a child, fathering a child. And that is your responsibility. That is something that you as a man now has to take on. You have to deal with court systems. You have to deal with potentially baby mama drama. And just thinking about it from a male perspective, you doing that, the gains and you being on your purpose in life is now potentially interrupted by an unplanned, unwanted potential pregnancy. But even outside of that, when you as a man, you have sex with a woman, you're sharing part of yourself with her. So, and think about it this way. I don't think many people think about it this way. So as you're growing up and you're having sex with this woman, you're having sex with that woman, you finally meet the woman of your dreams, the one that is you want to spend the rest of your life, you want to dedicate your life to her. Even if you don't have a child, even if you don't have a sexual disease, you have shared part of your spirit, your emotions out with these other women. And it would be difficult to say that you can give 100% of yourself now to your wife. You can give what's left, but not necessarily 100%. Part of who you are is out with these other women. So, guys, I think it would be important. I think would be important for you to be able to give as much, if all possible, to this woman that you're going to marry and make the wife, of your kids, and you're going to make this covenant with her to stay with her. Now, back in those days, if you will, David was the king, and there was a time when kings went off to war, the springtime. Now, David didn't do that, and yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But one evening, David was walking on his roof. This is in Second Samuel, chapter 11, verse 2. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. So David was up and about. He saw this beautiful woman bathing. Guys, you know how it is. We see a beautiful woman. She is, looks really good to us. Now, obviously, she may not be bathing, that's his scenario, but we can imagine that we see this beautiful woman and we're going to respond. We're going to react. Our body does that. We're men. This is how we are. Now, how did David choose to react to this? Did he exhibit self-control or not? Let's see. Verse 3, it says, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So David knew that this was another man's wife. Now, he said, okay, David sent messengers to her. She came to him and he slept with her. Then she went back home. So did David have any self-control? No. David reacted on his impulse. He reacted impulsively on his desire. He saw Bathsheba, he desired her, and he acted upon that. It was like there was no stop, and we'll get back to stop, and thinking and acting, but David didn't do none of that. He was impulsive. He did not have self-control. This leads us into the second area, which is lust of the eyes. David, in verse 3, knew this was another man's wife, and he did not have any self-control over his desire for someone else. This is a word we don't hear very often, but it's called covetedness. And this is another Merriam-Webster dictionary word, definition, if you will. Covetedness is marked by extreme, they used the word inordinate, but that just means extreme. Marked by extreme desire for wealth or possessions or for another's possession. Bathsheba was Uriah's wife. David had no claim over her. He, as the king, could have had just about any other woman in the world that was no man's wife. But he saw this other man's wife and he desired her. And not only did he desire her, he brought her up and he took her. He slept with her. I couldn't imagine the thoughts going through his head. But guys, we have to be mindful of that. We may see another car another person has. We may see another position that a person has. Somebody else may get promoted and we thought that we should have deserved the promotion or we wanted that promotion. Or we see another man's wife, as in this case with David and Bathsheba. These are things, this is an area where we have to have self-control. Why? Because you're going to end up causing yourself all type of grief if you do not have self-control. There are consequences for your actions, fellas. There are consequences for your actions. And we're going to get down into some of those consequences for King David here in just a bit. But seeing and wanting what other people have, it is a natural desire for us. But that's why we have to seek God to be content in what he has given us and give us ambition to go get our own, but not someone else's. And we'll talk about that ambition when we talk about the C, competitiveness in the classic series. That's important, but controlling that ambition is important as well. We'll talk about that more then. Last but not least, we have pride of life. Now, I really did think about this one, and the thing that stood out for me, thinking about with David, was that in 2 Samuel verse 1, it says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab, who was the leader of his army, out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. David, instead of being the king, being the leader, doing what he was supposed to be doing, out fighting with his troops and out fighting with his men, he was at home observing another man's wife and taking her and sleeping with her. Now, if David was in the position and doing what he was supposed to be doing, if he was following after the will of God at that time, if he was following, if you will, on his purpose, then this would have been avoided. He wouldn't have saw her on the bathtub. This would have been a non-issue. And guys, for us, many times we get in trouble by being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Many times we let our ego, and that's really what I think about pride of life. That's what it is. It's lack of self-control of your ego. David was so comfortable and proud in his position. He's like, I don't even need to go out and fight. They got this. You guys go out. I'm good. You know, that gets you in trouble. Man, your ego will get you in trouble. There's a verse in the book of Proverbs. It basically says, pride comes before destruction, a haughty spirit before the fall. And that is so true. King David, his pride in that he could take another man's wife as his own. And then you'll see it in the story. David got even so powerful that he could send this man off to die. They were fighting a war, as we said. The kings went up. This springtime, the kings go off to war. David wrote a letter to Joab, his general, if you want, told him to put Uriah, who was Bathsheba's husband, on the front line. And the reason why David did this was that Bathsheba was pregnant. Again, guys, there are consequences for our actions. There's consequences for lack of self-control. David got Bathsheba pregnant because Uriah was out fighting. So David brought Uriah home and said, you know what, go tend to your wife, go see your wife. Because he wanted, in my opinion, he wanted Uriah to sleep with Bathsheba so they could kind of hide the pregnancy, if you will. He was trying to cover things up. Uriah was like, no, he's a good soldier. He slept out with the servants. David said, you know what, come eat with me, come drink with me, let's come have a little feast, celebrate you coming home. He got Uriah drunk thinking that he would then go home and sleep with his wife so he can kind of cover up what went on between him and Bathsheba. Guys, and we end up doing that, right? We end up trying to cover up our mess so that we don't have to deal with the consequences of our lack of self-control. But Uriah still didn't go home. So David wrote a letter to Joab saying, put Uriah on the front lines and pull the rest of the men back. Basically, to me, this is a kind of murder because he intentionally put this man in a position to be killed. So not only do you have lust of flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life, I would even personally consider this murder because he intentionally set this man up to be killed. But David, his ego, he was going through all these different, these solutions to try to cover up what he did. And again, fellas, we see ourselves get in trouble. We want to do that. That is our natural. That is because we don't want to deal with the consequences. We don't want to deal with negative consequences, bad consequences. But if we demonstrate self-control, we can avoid a lot of situations. We can avoid a lot of entanglements, if you will, if we demonstrate self-control. So how did this end up for David, right? So the prophet Nathan came. This is in 2 Samuel chapter 12. This is verses roughly 1 through 12. And that's a little more at the end, but this is the primary area. Nathan basically came and told him a story about a rich man and a poor man. The poor man had basically one lamb, and he took care of it. It was his own. And The rich man had a visitor come in, but instead of taking one of his many, many lambs, he took the one from the poor man and served it up. And David was like upset. That man's gonna pay, I think he said like 4 times over, right? That man should be punished. David had righteous anger. And Nathan basically called him out. You the rich man. And the way I see the story was that Uriah had one wife, Bathsheba. David had many wives, many concubines. But yet he wanted to take the one that Uriah had. And God was not happy with him. And one of the way God punished him, he said that basically the sword, because you killed him by the sword is going to be basically on your reign and on your legacy, if you will. And he does some more stuff. God talked about how he was going to be punished, about how his son's going to come after him. You want to read the rest of that? You can. His son, man, that was some family. You want to talk about family drama? That was family drama. But it all stemmed from David's lack of self-control. Do we want a real life recent example of that? You guys know where I'm going with this. Mr. Will Smith. Now, I sat there and thought, I've been sitting there thinking about it. Was it lust of the flesh? No, I don't think so. Was it lust of the eyes? No, he was the man of the hour, right? Will Smith, you guys may not have heard, he was, there's a situation between him and Chris Rock, slap heard around the world. But I was thinking about Will Smith, and no, I don't think it was lust of the eyes either. The one that probably jumps out to me is the pride of life. And why do you say that? Well, Will, you guys know him and his wife, they've been going through drama. They have a unique relationship. We'll just leave it at that. But he's went through some troubles. He's had a lot put on him. He's had a lot of people dragging him through the mud. His reputation as a man, not as a Hollywood star, but as a man, has been lowered. I mean, like, lowered in many people's eyes. And in the social media eyes, his reputation and status as a man was lowered. And here's was his big night to kind of get back on top. People are going to hopefully forget about entanglements with his wife and this other young man. And this was Will's night. He was going to get the Oscar. He was the likely favorite. This was his night to get back on top, to kind of reset, if you will. Chris Rock told a joke, referenced his wife, her new bald hairstyle. And for those of you who don't know, his wife, Jada Smith, deals with alopecia, which is a bald that causes bald spots to occur in your hair. It's actually not uncommon for people to deal with it, especially black women to deal with that. But Chris Rock told a joke relating to G.I. Jane, who was a military, a woman who shaved her head in the movie so she can, fit in, be more with the men. And at first, his first Will Smith was smiling. He laughed. Whether that was a nervous laugh or not, we don't know, but he laughed. Then we saw Jada, roll her eyes, and Will Smith jumped up and responded after that moment. He went up, slapped Chris Rock, came back and sit down, said a few curse lines after to keep his wife's name out of your mouth. To me, I think Will's ego finally got in the way. I think said pride of life, right? Because he had been talked about so much. He had been drugged through the mud so much. Everybody's been making jokes at his expense. And first, his wife put him in trouble, with this whole entanglement. Of course, he couldn't respond to his wife. He had to take it, if you will. He took it. Then other people making jokes. The little boy put out that she had an entanglement with, had an affair with. He put out a song. He had to take that. People making jokes about him and, making memes about him, crying on the red table talk or whatever. He had to take all of that. Even at the Oscars, you had people making fun of his entanglement. He's like, no. You had other people, there's a skit where they brought the single men up and they called him up. Like Jada said, it's okay. He had to take all of that. And these were from women, so he couldn't respond to these women. And also had the little boy, of course, that was on a song. But these were primarily women making these jokes. Finally, Chris Rock, a man that was in front of him, made this joke about his wife. And I just think Will couldn't take it anymore. I think when he saw Jada's response, I think his ego said, you know what? I gotta be a man. I gotta be like a man. I gotta be tough. I gotta step up and defend my wife's honor. Yeah. Everybody's spoken a lot about that. All I'm gonna say was that that was a lack of self-control. Will's ego was hurt. He couldn't control it. He responded. So what? Now what do we got to deal with? People, he thought his reputation as a man was in the dirt before. In many people's eyes, his standard is his status is so low now. All the money that, well, relatively all the money in the world, but your status, your reputation is basically being destroyed now. Your legacy, which was supposed to be your greatest night, is destroyed because of a lack of self-control. He resigned from the academy, the Music and Motion Pictures Academy, and there may be additional fallout from that. He could have went to jail. Chris Rock was in every right to press charges against him. Will Smith could have been sitting in jail on the night he won the Oscars because of a lack of self-control. Guys, if we don't need no other prime example, yes, King David was an example of lack of self-control back during biblical times, but we have a prime example right here with Will Smith that shows a lack of self-control. We need to learn from Will Smith. We need to learn how to control ourselves. All right, Andre, you said that's all well and good. So what do we do? How do we go about doing that? I did some scouring on the internet, did some thinking, some praying, a little bit of that too, and some things that just jumped out. Self-control is a lot about emotional control. That is, how do you react to different stimuli in your life? We live in this world and there's going to be things that come at us and we're going to have to respond to those things. Developing self-control is all about having control over our impulses, that reaction, that kind of quick reaction, our emotions, our feelings, and our desires, those things that we want. So how do we develop better self-control? I know you may have heard this kind of as a kid. For those who may not, may be new to you, take note of it. It's something that I am working on trying to do, and definitely that I talk to the young men that I talk to as well. First, stop. When a situation comes about, when you find yourself in an impulsive, reactive mode, if you will, whether it's whatever the stimulus may be, pause, stop, and say count to 10. Right? You remember that you hear people say count to 10? And the reason why you're doing that is that you're giving yourself time to get your emotions under control. So when you find yourself in that situation, think about with Will Smith. Okay, take the example. When Jada gave him that look, you guys seen it when she gave him that look. Will, if he would have took the time to stop and breathe, count to 10, he could have given time to get his emotions under control, would have given time to not act out of impulsiveness, but to be able to think things through, which is the second step, think. Taking that 10 seconds, the moments to breathe, to get your emotions back under control, that gives you time to switch from a reactive mode to more of an active mode, from a reactive mindset to an active mindset. And what does that mean? That means you can now start to think about, okay, what are my actions? Do I just say something from my seat? Think about Will Smith. Do I admonish this guy from my seat? What do I say? Do I get up and do I go and slap him as I did? Do I just not say anything? These are all different options Will Smith could have taken. I'm sure there is many more. But if he would have stopped, took some breath to get himself under control, thought through each one of those actions has pros and cons to it, then he could have acted in an appropriate way. And by that, I mean he could have been intentional in how he acted. And intentionality is what's important in your actions because that means you're acting with purpose. You're not just reacting to the impulse of the moment or the emotion of the moment or the desire of the moment. By being intentional with your actions, you are purposeful in what you're doing. You're moving with purpose in life. That means you're moving towards achieving your goals. That means that you're acting towards making your way towards the vision that you have that you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes, guys, and I've learned this in 40 some years of living, inaction may be the appropriate action to take. I know that sounds weird, but think about it. Not doing something may be the best course of action. Will Smith not reacting at that time, not getting up and slapping him, if you will, he wouldn't have had the troubles with the academy, the investigations. There wouldn't have been any potential option for him to go to jail, even though Chris Rock didn't press charges. He wouldn't have had to resign from the Motion Picture Academy. Yes, he would have had to deal with Jada when he got home, right? And then, same thing applies. Stop, think, and act. Will Smith is a prime example of this idea of being able to have self-control. All right, fellas, that's it for today. I hope you liked this video, guys. I hope it was helpful. I really do pray that it was helpful in understanding how we as classic men can have self-control over our flesh, our fleshy physical desires, over our eyes, our covetousness, not wanting what other people have, and over our egos and pride of life, guys. Important areas, guys, that we need to have self-control over on a daily basis. All right. This is Andre again from a Christian male perspective. Stay sharp, fellas. Thank you for watching today's video. Please like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can follow us on social media at A Christian Male Perspective. Stay sharp, fellas.